talk to you about my experiences that I had with building scripts and also building Azure DevOps extensions, but also seeing one of my extensions basically got installed a lot on a different Azure DevOps environment. And I had a lot of experiences during that time building that and also maintaining that as well. But if we really look at the problem we normally have, I normally take a reference to basically one of the things I do with my kids. With one of my kids, I watch a lot of Pokemon cartoons, as he's a real big fan of Pokemon cartoons. And you can see this small Pokemon evolving in basically one larger Pokemon. And even if it's evolved to that size of Pokemon, it evolves again to another size over time. That's basically what happened with me developing PowerShell scripts against certain platforms and moving that to a generic piece of code or a generic piece of tooling within my environment. So what basically happened is this is just a small example of a script you could have within your environment that just creates a resource group in the Azure platform, but also directly places a resource lock on that resource group. And over time, you would like to evolve that to a generic piece, because certain pieces you build, you will be reusing that to in different situations, maybe in different customers as well. So that needs to be evolved to something larger. So maybe in some time you also add tagging capabilities to that script. And after that, if you have that tagging capabilities and you have a real good piece of code, it can evolve to something that you can use in the interface, that you can use within your automations. So that's basically a situation where I got in and where a lot of people are in at this moment. If I look at companies and how they build their PowerShell script files, they reuse those scripts in very different situations on different organizations, but still keep copying that script over and over again to different environments, basically losing track of what they have built and how it runs. So that's basically the problem we will be talking about today, and I will also show you how you can start off building your extensions, and I will show my lessons learned I have. But first, let me further introduce myself. So just like I said before, I'm Mike van der Graag. I live in the Netherlands at this moment, and I'm the CTO of 350. 350 is a consultancy company in the Netherlands specialized in Microsoft technologies. And next to that, I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, so I give a lot of Microsoft trainings around the country. And otherwise, I'm also the founder of the Dutch Cloud Meetup. What a meetup group is within the Netherlands, where we have a lot of Microsoft-centric sessions, but sometimes always also AWS or Google Cloud platforms. So if we further go down, so basically extensions. What are extensions? How can we use those extensions? What can we do with it? And what can we do with it, for example, in Azure DevOps? So within Azure DevOps, there are certain types of extensions. So you don't only have, for example, the pipeline extensions that you see very often, but you also have the dashboard widgets. You have work item extensions. You have basically hub extensions that are basically different pages within Azure DevOps, but you also have actions for on the hub. So basically there are hub pages. And you can also create separate extensions for actions within that hub. So you have different type of extensions, and basically where we are focusing on today are the pipeline extensions, where you will see that you can really reuse the scripts you create within a pipeline task and run that within your Azure DevOps environment. So if we have basically an extension, where does extension consist of? So basically an extension can have multiple layers depending on the information you want, depending on the type you are building. So they normally exist of an extension manifest file. That's just basically a JSON file with all the information you need regarding that extension. You have some discovery assets, so as your markdown file with the information, how you can use it, how you can install it, how you can configure it, together with some screenshots and the icon as well. And you have the static files, basically the script files you need for the PowerShell, or maybe if you're building a hub extension, you can also have HTML files and also some CSS files as well. Placing this all together will deliver you basically an extension. So let's dig down a little bit deeper and see what you really need to get started. One of the prerequisites you really need, and it's not much, you have to have, if you want to start easily, of course, you have to have Node installed on your PC. And you can also use the TFX CLI. That's basically a Node CLI for Azure DevOps. So that's a platform independent CLI that you can use within your Windows machine to scaffold extensions. So you can really start off with scaffolding the complete folder you need to build that extension. But it also contains a lot of tasks you can do against the Azure DevOps platform. So it's not only for building the extensions, but it really helps you with building the extensions, scaffolding the folder that you need for the extension, and also installing the extension right away on the DevOps environment itself and generating the packages around it. Later on in the demonstration, where we will just move on basically my time frame as well as that when I've started learning building extensions, you can also see that we moved from basically using the TFX CLI tooling to the automated tooling that Azure DevOps delivers for you to also automatically build your extensions. So if we have the prerequisites installed, the first thing you do is basically starting off creating your folder with the files you need. And there's basically also a downside to everything around the scaffolding. Is as I'm a Microsoft guy and I write a lot of PowerShell scripts to talk to different services like the Azure platform, I really wanted to have a small component that I could reuse easily on my extensions. So for example, if I think of a nice capability, so for example, a few years back, I think it's 1 year, 2 years back, I just thought of I needed a functionality within the platform, and in this example, it was the Azure DevOps platform to trigger different pipelines. So for example, you are running a release pipeline, but from that release pipeline, you also want to trigger a different release pipeline and maybe also a specific stage within that pipeline as well. So I thought, okay, I have a PowerShell script, but I want to have that easily encapsulated within an extension so that I can reuse it, but my colleague can reuse it as well in his project. And maybe people in the community want to reuse that extension as well. So that's why I really like the PowerShell versions, because it makes it very easy from you to use your PowerShell script and incorporate it to that extension. And the only downside there was that basically the scaffolding of the TFX CLI does not contain the scaffolding files for the PowerShell extension. So basically what I namely do, I just create a default folder for my extensions where I have everything prepped already for my extensions. And basically what you can see here at the right side of the slide is that there are specific files and folder structure you need to use for your extension. So basically what you can see here is that we have a README file that basically contains the information about the extension, what does the extension do and how does it work. You have the vss-extension.json, that's basically the encapsulation of your task and your extension, and contains a lot of information regarding the extension. We will dig down later into it. You have an icon.png. Of course, you need an icon for your extension, otherwise it doesn't look cool within the interface. And maybe if you want to sell it or share it with the community for free, it needs to look cool on the marketplace as well. And then you have basically the task name folder, and that's basically that's a folder that you call with a specific name of your task, and that contains basically all the information you need to run the task on the Azure DevOps platform. So you have a task.json with the separate information, and maybe also the input fields you want on the extension. You have the PowerShell file. Of course, that's the file that really kicks off the task itself. And you have a ps_modules folder. So basically, if you use external modules within your extension, you can use this folder to pre-install basically the modules within that folder. Otherwise, you can also retrieve the modules, of course, in execution time, but that really makes sure that you maybe have different versions, and it also slows down the task as well, because you need to get that module externally. So I normally incorporate it completely within that ps_modules folder to have a very clean and fast task within Azure DevOps. If we dig some a little bit deeper into the files. This is, for example, the properties that you have within a vss-extension.json, where you can see that there's a lot of information on the extension itself. So who's the publisher? What's the version? Give it a specific ID. You have the specific targets. So you have the specific targets. Can we use it on the cloud, for example, in Azure DevOps? Or is it just a Team Foundation server version? And that's basically the Azure DevOps server versions. You still see in building extensions for the Azure DevOps platform, you see a lot of references still to the old Azure DevOps system like VSDS and Team Foundation. So there are still some old references in there, and I think they will be in there until the end of time of the complete platform. You have the different type of scopes. So basically, where are you scoping your extensions? Are you scoping it to the pipeline section? Are you scoping it to the work items and everything? You have some base URIs, contributions folders. Those basically contain only the information about the things itself. So basically what you see here is example of a vss-extension.json file where you can see the different types. So you can see the scope in here as well. So it's basically scope to the build part. And scoping it to the build part will make sure that you can use the extension within the pipelines and within the releases. So you can have the categories as well. You can have some branding. Basically, this branding is used within the Visual Studio Marketplace. And you can also place, for example, screenshots and everything in here in this file to make sure that your extension looks cool in the marketplace. You have some repository types so that you can link to the repository. Later on, I will show you some things on the marketplace that really reference to this file. So basically, the complete marketplace entry that you get within the Visual Studio Marketplace is referenced from this file. If you then move over to the task.json, it really contains the information about the task and the thing you are executing on the platform. You have some type of the same information that's in the vss-extension.json. So you again have the author, you have a friendly name for your extension so that you have a real friendly name within the UI of Azure DevOps itself. You have some specific grouping for the UI, and that's basically grouping for your task properties. So for example, if you are building a task, that task will certainly need input properties as well. I can think of a script that really doesn't need any type of input in, for example, string values, information. So that's basically where you use the groups and inputs. So in the UI, you can see that you have different groups. That's basically UI related in the tasks session and in the classic release pipelines. And you have the inputs for what do you want to input. And of course, you have an execution part where you specify what you want to execute if this script starts. So basically, I was also referencing the groups and the inputs. And as you all may know, we also have the YAML pipelines within the platform. Building an extension for Azure DevOps and basically building an extension for the build execution and the release execution can also be used in the YAML pipelines. But you see here as well is that you still have the group section, you still have the input section. The input section really references directly to the input properties as well that you have in YAML. But for example, the groups aren't usable within the YAML section. That's only used for the interface you have within a release pipeline of adding your task as well. So I have an example here as well for a task itself. So you have the task friendly name, you have a category, again a version, and of course on down you have a PowerShell where you have a target to your specific script file. But it's nice to show you in screenshots, but first let's go and just get a quick feeling on how we can build an extension. So if we go to Visual Studio Code, I have some prepped folders in here already. So basically I have a prepped folder in here with the default files I just discussed. So we have the vss-extension.json. You can see that we in here have some specific reference. So I have a name for the extension. I have a publisher. So basically what you need to be able to publish your extensions in the marketplace, you have to have a publisher. So I will show you later on how that looks like. In the marketplace section, we have the README file. We have some specific tags. Basically, these tags will also be visible on the marketplace section. We have some specific contributions for the tasks. We have some links to get started. Basically, these are now referencing my GitHub repository. And again, we have a files path, basically pointing to the path that my extension lives in. So basically, if you see the README, it's empty. So the information on the marketplace item will also be empty. If you look at the task.json, we have a small file specifying what the task is. We again have the name. We also have a friendly name. We have hello from an Azure DevOps pipeline task. We have some markdown if possible. And of course, the execution. This is basically the main and important part of the file. This references the execution part. So what do I need to execute when this pipeline starts? So this is just a task.ps1 file. So you can here see that it's quite easy just to have a PowerShell script within your extension and make it executable for your platform. So for example, if I would like to execute something different, that contains no input, I can just paste it in here, build the extension, publish it to my Azure DevOps environment and run the task. And I can use that task to run multiple times in different environments. I don't have to copy over the script. No, I have an extension that I can share with people to use that extension. So what does the TFX CLI look like? So if, for example, I just open the PowerShell window, let me point it to the correct folder. And in this PowerShell window, oh, that's the wrong one. Let me get this one over to my other screen. You can do different situations. So you have the TFX CLI. It's also already installed on my machine. And basically what you need to do is log in to the TFX CLI, of course, and point it to the correct Azure DevOps organization you are working with. So let me point it to my MO organization. Let me copy in over a personal access token. So basically communicating with the Azure DevOps platform through the TFX CLI is done using personal access token. So you have to generate a personal access token in the platform to do that communication. So I'm now logged in correctly. And now I can basically build up the extension itself. So there is a command that you can use to create the extension based on the manifest files. So basically the vss-extension.json file is the manifest file for the extension itself, and that is used to build up the extension. So if we execute this, we can see that the extension is created. And what you can also see in the background is that we get a VSX file. Basically, this file contains everything regarding my extension. So we can publish this extension to the marketplace. Let me just check. Yeah, it's in there. Okay. Let me check if this now works. Basically, you also have an action within TFX to install extensions on a publisher. But let me do this now manually. So if we go to the Visual Studio Marketplace, I'm not sure if everyone has ever seen this, but in the top bottom, you normally can log in. So at this moment, I'm already logged in. And you can click on the buttons, build your own. You will get to a documentation page of Microsoft, or you can already publish your extensions. And then you will move to a management section of the marketplace where you can publish your extension. You can see that I have at this moment, I have two publishers. I have a Mike van der Graag publisher and I have a development van der Graag publisher. Mike van der Graag publisher I use for my public extensions. Those are already published and already used. and also install the mini environments, but they also have the development. I basically use this this part for developing my extensions and also doing beta testing. So for example, if I build a new feature for an extension, I firstly publish it to here. I give other people access to that extension to make sure that they can really reuse that extension as well, and that they can check if everything works correctly. So you can see here that we can add an extension. So let me check Azure DevOps, drag and drop the file. Let me get to the correct point, extension, prep, and drag and drop it in here. Oh, that's, let me just click and upload. Oh, sure, it works then. Not sure what it did. Presentations, JB, extension, prep, p6 file. So what you can see now here is that the extension itself appears here. It's a private extension, so it's not visible on the marketplace. It is 0.0.5 version, and it's called Hello Global Automation Bootcamp. And it's also verified as well. So basically what happens if you upload a new extension, background process verifies the file and makes sure that no malicious things are in that extension. What I can also do, I can also do the view extension. This is the normal view of an extension in the marketplace where you can see the different things arising. So basically you can see the icon I have, you can see the categories, you can see the text as well. And you can also see the get it for free button. But first I need to manage it because this is a private extension. I firstly need to share it with a specific organization, and otherwise I cannot install it on an environment. So let me share it with my demo environment. Close this up. I go back to the view extension page. I can click on get it free. As it's a free extension. It will open another page where I'm already logged in, of course, because I'm still logged in on this interface. And it will ask me, okay, to which Azure DevOps organization do you want it to install? Basically, it will give you a drop-down list with the organizations that I have for this account. And I can install it right away. So I'm not sure why it isn't loading. Refresh the screen and just do it on another tab. Maybe that works. Yeah, there it is. So it's loading my organizations. You can see that I only have one organization. You're all set. Okay, so it's now installed on my organization. And I'm now also in my organization. And if I check the organization settings and the extensions part, I'll see that extension here as well. That's developed by the specific publisher I'm using. So basically this extension can now be used in any kind of release flow there is. So let me just, for the demonstration, use a classical pipeline so that you can also see that there's an interface on it, but of course you can still use the YAML pipeline. And if you're capable of doing YAML, you should really use the YAML part as well. What you can see here now, I have the extension here. I see the same icon. I can add it to my task field. And as you can see here as well, basically I still don't have any input tasks in here as well. I only have a display name. And if I want, I could save this one. Let me just create a release for the demonstration. And you'll see that the release will be kicked off. It will be queued, it will run, and it will just print out the message I have within the extension. But if you move that further, and basically if you are looking at communicating, for example, to Azure, you all know that if you use an Azure extension in Azure DevOps, you have, and let me just quickly show you this as well. Let me just run this. And normally, if you, for example, if you use an Azure PowerShell function, if we get PowerShell, yeah, let me just add it. You always get this drop down. So you have to configure a service connection to your Azure platform to be able to deploy resources. That service connection makes sure that you are signed into the platform and that you can do the specific actions you want. So when building your extensions and when you're building extensions against the Azure platform, you want to use the same mechanism. And basically the extension part is already completely prepared for that as well. So I have a prepared extension in here, and that basically is more like the same as the other extension that I just showed you with just a lot of more files. So if we just simply scroll through it, this is the extension file that's basically um, not that specific, but if we look at the task.json, um, it's also the same. The only thing that really changes is basically the input section. So basically the input section specifies which input parameters you have within Azure DevOps itself. So you can see here that we have an input called connected service name. And basically that connected service name will give you the um, service connection dropdown for Azure, making sure that you can reuse that connection and use it in your extension and really do those actions in the same way you are used to with the other extensions of Microsoft itself. The other things are just other types of inputs, but also this one is also good to mention. So for example, if I click on a subscription on this input field, this extension makes sure that the resource groups displayed in this list are the resource groups that are in that extension. So it will give you a drop down of all the resource groups in the extension itself. Same, for example, for the locations. You can fill in the text in a text field. So you also have different types of fields. So you can see here that I have a multi-line for my tags. That's basically a string, and I have a Boolean field, and that will be a checkbox for if I need to place a lock. You can see here that I have specific data source bindings. These data source bindings are specified within the VSS extension file, and those really specify what you have to query. So if we look at, let me check where they are. I will get them later for you. There are specific extension. I'm not sure if it's prepped in this version of the extension itself. But basically the data source bindings specify what you want to query. So for in this example, we are querying an API, and that API returns the resource group names with the used connection service name, and the same for the location. So it will give you back the specific locations that can be used. And of course, we also have the run task. So basically when this extension starts, it starts with the run task. And what you see then here is in the run task, you can also see that we are loading the modules. So we have some module files in the script root part, and we get some, as you can see here, it's still referencing the old name, the VSTS input, but it does a function called get VSTS input. So it's getting an input value from your tasks fields within your task. Basically, for example, in this example, it gets the connection server name. So here is the service name retrieved from the input. And later on, you can see, for example, that it's get the input based on that service name. And a little bit deeper, it has an initialize AC module, meaning that it will initialize the connection with Azure based on the endpoint you retrieved with the service name. So basically the PowerShell modules that are available for building extensions are you can use to completely build up that connection to Azure in the same way Microsoft does with its extensions to perform the task you want. So as you can see here as well, the next thing I do is just I load in my own Azure Resource Group PowerShell script to perform the different tasks within Azure. And there is no logging mechanism in here because everything for the logging is done here to initialize that AC module and make sure that the connection is built up to that specific Azure environment just based on a specific PowerShell module that you can use against the platform. So for using the Input values, you use the VSTS task SDK. You can use that to get those methods for the get VSTS input. And you have the VSTS Azure helpers to really build up that connection for you. You just place in those modules in this folder and import those connections and really reuse those modules to make that connection, build it up, and make sure that you can use that connection. So if we go back to the slides, so basically what did we do? So basically we scaffolded the folder. I prepped the folder for you guys. Now you can update the task.json, vss-extension.json to really make sure that your extension is in a way you would like. Then you would normally add the VSTS task SDK module to make sure that you can use that the input field. Then you package up that extension and make sure that you really have that VSX file that you can upload it to your marketplace, and you can install that extension in your specific DevOps environment to use it and maintain it as well and run it within your tasks. So now as we now have seen how easy, I think it's easy, but how relatively easy it is to build your extensions if you just write your PowerShell scripts. And I've been in a lot of companies where they use a lot of PowerShell scripts and they just copy over them from one organization to another, from one project to another. And they are not really using about building them up generically or building up private publishers, because you don't need to, if you publish extensions to the marketplace, you don't have to do that publicly. So for example, if an organization wants to build PowerShell extensions, you can use a private marketplace publisher for your organizations, where you can give specific people the access rights and use those extensions within your Azure DevOps environment just to make it easy. So I've built a lot of extensions for companies where we generate markdown files from documentation parts to specific actions in Azure and really leverage that platform. So if we look at the journey of what I've done with my own extensions is in 2017, I started writing a simple PowerShell script to publish Power BI reports to the Power BI platform. The problem that I saw with Power BI is that it was relatively easy to build up Power BI reports, but there was no easy way to publish those reports to the platform. So for example, if you build a Power BI report, mainly at our company, they were attaching it to the dev database. They published it to Power BI, then they attached it to the staging interface, they published it to Power BI, then they connected it to the production environment and published it to Power BI. And I said to the guys, okay, why are you doing this manually? You can automate this. So I started off building a script to get those PBX files, publish them to the right environment, and also making some small changes to it afterwards, just to move them automatically from dev, staging to production, and making sure that the data connection in the Power BI files was correctly configured. So that's basically where I started off. Then in December of 2017, I published the PowerShell script as the Power BI Actions extension. So I really started building up my first extension, as this was one of my first extensions, just to make sure that the script I wrote was used in many more situations, but also made it easier for the people I worked with to use those scripts at other organizations as well. But me still being able to manage the script itself, meaning that before that, they were just taking my scripts to different organizations, they deployed it there, and then they got back to me, okay, Mike, I found a bug, you need to fix it. Okay, I fixed it. That bug only moved to that organization. The other organizations it was already running in did not have that bug fix. So that's why I built that extension. So if I fixed the bug, I fixed it in the extension, and the extension automatically got installed on each and different organizations in Azure DevOps. And then it was called Power BI Actions Extensions. In January of 2018, the extension itself got notified by Microsoft. I got some email from people within Microsoft that were stating, okay, you have a really nice extension. Let's look together with how we can do this, and we are building an extension ourselves as well. I said, okay, I really want to look at your white paper. They were writing a white paper at that time as well. And I said, okay, you can build your own extension if you want, but my extension is free as well in the marketplace, and it can really be used by anyone. So I said to them, don't bother, just use my extension. And then a few months later, and Microsoft still didn't have that extension available in the marketplace. I really started thinking, okay, we have the Power BI API. How can we really leverage that API to really enhance my extension as well? So I deprecated the first version. That basically was then the Power BI upload extension, how it's called correctly. And I created the Power BI actions. So I've incorporated more actions within my extension to perform all sort of things within the Power BI platform. That really made my extension, in my opinion, a great success. Because that extension grew from 500 users till at this moment I'm almost at 5,000 active installations. So that's basically 5,000 different organizations that use my extension and really use it a lot as well. So that really made me think about, okay, I've published that extension. My installation base goes from 500 to a couple of thousand. How do I maintain that extension myself? So I added a lot of automation around my extension itself to be able to manage it as well. So for example, if I do a bug fix, I just do a git push of my local branch and my pipelines are triggered and everything is deployed automatically as well. That's what I did in 2018. In 2019, I have added some small features and small actions based on the feature request I keep getting on my repository. And in 2020, mid 2020, I've added the service principal support. So Power BI connections were still made with user accounts. In 2020, Microsoft added the service principal support for the APIs. And that was basically one of the largest releases I did for that extension. And then we are in 2021. So if we now look at the Power BI extensions we have, so the first one that I deprecated in 2018, that's called the published Power BI file, still has some active installations of 1100. So people are still using that extension. It's been already deprecated for a long time. If you look now at the Power BI actions file that's started in 2018 after deprecating the other one, now has 4,100 installations that are actively using that extension. You can also see that because of the extensions I've built, I've also got into other top extensions. So basically the thing that I learned, I will show you later on in that extension. So if you look at the extension I've built, I now have basically I have 4 real active extensions that are mainly used within different organizations, and those are basically the Power BI Actions extension, the Trigger Azure DevOps pipeline, and the version number counter, and the file content to variable extension that are really actively used within organizations that they can use. So let me just do another small short demo of basically what I have. So if we look at the extensions part, and if I just query my own name, I get a page with all my extensions. Here you can see that there are the different extensions. You can see that the amount of installations. You can also see the marketplace. Basically, you can now see the marketplace with completely filled in information, how you need to use it, how the connection is built up, what the output is, for example, if you run this extension, and references to other different informations. You can also see the version releases we have done on this extension to make sure that people know what changes on the extension itself. If you, for example, look at the deprecated version, it's still on the marketplace. And you may think, okay, why is it still on the marketplace? I cannot deactivate the extension if there are still active installations of this extension. So as there are now still 1100 installations, I don't think I will ever be able to deprecate it completely. But I really don't do any support on this extension anymore because all the functionalities are built in the Actions one, and this is basically a really old one as well. If we look at the automation that I've built in the time, so basically when I moved from just a PowerShell script to an Azure DevOps extension, I also created a GitHub repository. So I mainly publish all my extensions to that GitHub repository that I built myself. So where you can really see that we have the specific code, so it's able for you to get and maybe reuse if you are starting to build extensions. But you can also see how I built everything. So you can see that we have a Power BI Actions extensions, for example, here, and where I also have the complete data in here. So when I started the Power BI extensions, and you can see it in the old version, I built my own module. So basically, I built up my own Power BI module around the APIs of Azure of Power BI, and you can also see Power BI moving along in time. So when I built up my own Power BI module, it was completely great. And what I saw this year, at the start of this year, Microsoft also came with its own module, with its own PowerShell, Power BI module for PowerShell. So what I've been doing since then is slowly incorporating the parts Microsoft built, meaning that I don't have to maintain my own PowerShell module anymore. No, Microsoft is maintaining it, and I'm just leveraging those capabilities in my own extension, making sure that I do not have to do all that work I've done for years now, and Microsoft does a small part of that work for me. So that's what you basically see here. So you still see here my own module. This is basically the old version for my largest release this year. And if we look at the new one, you can see that we are leveraging the modules that Microsoft made for Power BI. So I still have some capabilities in here of my own module, but I'm slowly moving those capabilities, if they are available at this moment, to the Power BI module to make sure that Microsoft is maintaining all those things. And in Azure DevOps, I created the complete automation regarding my extension. So if I do my check-ins within GitHub, my pipelines will run. And basically what my pipelines will do, they will just build the extension. They will do some small PowerScript analyzing, package the extension itself. So those were basically the manual tasks I just showed you within the Windows terminal. If it's packaged, it will place them in the pipeline output, and then it will be deployed to my test environment. That's basically my test publisher I just showed you. If it's published there, I can share it to different organizations so that they can test it out and wait on their replies on how it's finished. And if I move it to, for example, my main branch, the publish part of the pipeline will run as well, making sure that my extension is published to my main publisher, meaning that it's available for everyone in the marketplace and available to install as well. What I maybe can show you as well, this is basically one of the old versions, as Azure DevOps, of course, is evolving as well. I'm also moving my old pipelines, so basically my classic pipelines, to the YAML parts. So you still see the old pipelines here as well. So we still have, for example, if we look at the published Power BI file, we still have an old release pipeline still available that did the release of my extensions. So you can see that there are extensions already available within the Azure DevOps platform to build and publish your extensions, making it really easy for you to get started and also get started with the automation around it. If you get started, just try to use the YAML parts of the release pipelines itself. So then I just switch back to the presentation itself. So basically, what were the lessons I've learned of building the extensions myself? The main thing that I thought of is that when I started it, I thought, okay, it will be an extension. Maybe I will get 10, 15 installations on organizations. But when it really hit off and the installations got started, and we had a lot of installations, and we tipped 1,000 installations, it was taking up a lot of time for me to manage the extension itself as well, because you will get a lot of issues in GitHub. Basically, not all issues that you get are real issues. Mainly, I think 80% of the issues you get in GitHub are just questions. How can I do this? How can I do that? So you really needed to make sure that the documentation around the extension is in a correct order, but you also need to make sure that you have to think of the fact that people use your extensions that do not know what the capabilities of the platform are. So I think 50% of the questions I get are from people that see the extensions, that know some default functionality of Azure DevOps, and start using the extensions. So if you ask them questions about did you configure the service connection? How did you configure this? They are not capable of giving you a good and okay answer as well. And the main part as well for me is that I am not a Power BI expert. I'm an Azure DevOps expert and an Azure expert. So I'm not aware of how Power BI works. And that is also things that are happening. I also get a lot of Power BI questions because they think, okay, you built this extension for Power BI. You must know Power BI as well. Yeah, I know the basic part, but I'm not aware of the complete functionality of Power BI because it's a large product as well. So I sometimes also ask really the help of people that send me issues as well. Okay, if we do this, can we do that? Can you maybe send me a test Power BI file of your situation so that I can test out the scenarios? And that's also the thing that it got me started with the beta testing of the extension itself for different users, to really make sure that the things I'm delivering to the customers really works and that they can test it before I publish it to production. Basically, if you want to get started with an extension and you want to get those thousands of installations, you really need to find a good idea. This was not intended for me. The same for the trigger pipeline extension. I did not intend it to get 1,000 or more installations on those extensions. I was just having fun with technology, just having fun with building Power BI scripts, just having fun with the Azure DevOps platform. So normally, I think you will have the best ideas when you're just having fun, and you are doing the things that you love. So basically, that's also the thing I've learned, and that will also be a tipping point in me managing the extensions as well. As long as I'm having fun, and as long as I'm love doing what I'm doing, I will keep managing those extensions. But if it gets too much, I just need to stop that as well, because it really takes up a lot of time. You really need to think that as well. If you publicly are developing extensions and really placing them on the marketplace for free. So just to get back to the end, so we saw that we built an extension and that it was relatively easy to start off with this PowerShell script and using that extension. And then you also had some lessons from me on what you need to think of if you would like to start an extension and do that publicly as well. There are some small resources here available for you that you can use to get started. You can also use my GitHub repository for samples, of course, if you want. It's all publicly available. You can reuse PowerShell scripts if you want as well. That's completely no problem. I hope that you had a lot of fun during my session, that you learned a lot about how you need to build extensions and what it really takes to manage those extensions as well. So if you want to get in contact, you can look at my LinkedIn. You can follow me on Twitter. You can also have a look at my website, where I also have a lot of information regarding extensions. And if you have some real direct questions that you want to ask me, you can also email me as well. So thank you for being here at this time as well. And I hope you enjoyed the session. And if there are any questions, we still have approximately 5 minutes. So
thank you for that, Mike. So I have to say that, first of all, thank you not only for sharing, obviously, the extension, but your story. And I think the story is very, very important because I also know a couple of other MVPs, like yourself, who built extensions for tools for Azure DevOps. For example, the Dynamics 365 Power Apps tasks for Azure DevOps, for example, by Whale. One of the things I do know about that story was that it began as a community initiative, and before you know it, the world depends on your tool. But then obviously Microsoft will try and make an initiative to release something, for example, the Power Apps tool. But we'll find that, for some reason, the community, for whatever reason, maybe it's ease of use, maybe it's just simplicity, and maybe the feature gaps or whatever parity, and what I've seen, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen that the community extensions are always far more successful with users. I can't think of any other examples from Microsoft extensions for Azure DevOps, but what I can tell you is that from community-based extension they definitely are a lot more adopted. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's true. That basically depends on the starting point when you start with an extension. Normally you see that someone in the community will start off with a functionality in an extension, and then Microsoft will pick it up and I think, okay, we need something for this as well. So they are later in the tree, of course. So they are later to the party, meaning that a lot of people already know that community extension. That's one of the problems. And what I normally see is that there are also a feature gap in there as well. What I saw with my Power BI extension, what I showed you during the timeline as well, is that I got contacted by Microsoft. Basically, the first thing they said to me, okay, you cannot use that Power BI icon. I said, okay, why not? Yeah, you just can't. Okay. And now I asked and they said, okay, an advocate will just contact you and we will make sure that that there's no problem. I never had any contact with an advocate as well. But what they also said, and what I mentioned already, is that they will want to build their own extension. And a month later, I got a link to the repository of that extension. And not anything bad about Microsoft, but it had a complete feature gap with my extension. So I was really wondering, okay, why, if you're on Microsoft, why are you building this extension? If you see a community effort that has a lot more features in it, you can see the PowerShell script. So it's also a real clean extension. So to my opinion, of course, but it's a clean extension. So why are you taking the effort of building an extension? And I can give you an example as well. And that's basically last year I built an extension for ARM-TTK, and basically ARM-TTK is a testing framework for ARM templates. And I started building that extension. And after publishing my extension, a few weeks later, I saw another community-based ARM-TTK extension. But that ARM-TTK extension had a lot more features. So the first thing I did is just deprecate my own functionality and started using the other one, because I wanted to support the community itself, and also thinking, okay, I can also build out my own extension, but why would I do that if there's already another extension that's also community based, that looks good and has a lot of more functionality than I can build. So let's just use another one. And that's basically part of mindset as well.
Yeah, interesting. But look, you've got a lot of extensions. I mean, the MVPs, I know that they either have one or maybe two, projects. And as you mentioned, it is driven by passion, nothing but
Yep.
passion, really. And at some point, that passion, how long can you keep that passion up? And I think, yeah, that's probably, I think that's the main advantage Microsoft has, I guess, is, is really that.
Yeah.
But to be honest, like I said, these are the tools I've seen are being used. They're maintained continuously, and then the community maintains them as well. Because once it becomes open source, then you have other contributors that contribute towards it, and it becomes a community, right? And then the
Yep.
power of community is you can't beat that, right? You know that camaraderie, to support the effort and the goal together.
That's true.
Um, yeah, that's what really wins at the end of the day. And I just want to thank you for building these extensions, because I know that there are a lot of challenges when it comes to doing deployments, and especially on the Power Platform. Power Platform, you've got Power Apps, Power Automate, you've got Power BI. These low code tools, solutions, are not regular applications, as in they are low code, which means that they require a lot of configuration data, and a lot of variables, and so a lot of environment variables, and so the pipelines tend to have a lot of nuances compared to traditional web apps, for example. So it is a bit more challenging to build the pipelines for these, for Power Platform, but they do provide a lot of value, because essentially what you're doing is you're providing a deployment pipeline for a low code platform, and it does provide a hell of a lot of value when you're giving so much power to your end users to use these applications to build their solutions, whether it's an app, whether it's a report. So there's a huge opportunity here for these types of extensions. And I think you've definitely done that. So I just want to thank you again, Mike. I know we've gone
Thanks.
over, I know it's very late for you, Mike, but do
No
you have
problem.
any final comments or
No, not
thoughts?
really. I thought I just hope if you had a great session, and I think I'll just go to bed because I have a soccer game I have to manage tomorrow. So
Thank you so much for that. I hope your soccer game goes well, and thank you for everyone who attended and stayed till the very end. Because we are continuing tomorrow at 6 a.m. We will continue this event. So I just want to thank everyone.